There we go. So I wanted to come on here and explain a little bit about this plank challenge. I know planks are a kind of common core exercise, and some people think they're boring and unimportant. So I am going to go through just a brief kind of explanation of why planks are actually one of the most important core exercises, how they transfer to real life and the rest of your strength training, and why we opted for planks as opposed to like sit-ups or crunches or something like that, some more conventional ab exercises, instead of those things. So I am going to share my screen real quick because I do have a nice presentation, and this is straight out of our To the Core core training guide. And so to start here, the core, right? The core, the main function of the core is to actually stabilize the spine and to maintain a stable base off of which to create all other movement. Okay, so its first and most important function is stability for your trunk, which we'll get into what that is. But its secondary function is to then transfer energy from the base, right, your pillar, to the limbs in order to generate movement. Okay, so the three sections of your spine, right, of your trunk, from top to bottom, are your cervical spine, which is your neck, your thoracic spine, your mid back, and then your lumbar spine, which is your low back. Okay, and your core actually includes everything around the spine. So 360 degrees around your abdominals. Most people think of your core just as what's in the front, right? We see that six pack. And that is the rectus abdominis. So that is one part of your core. This is what is responsible for spinal flexion, right? Or bending you forward, as well as anti-extension or going backwards. And so that is the one muscle, basically. It works some others, but the primary muscle that is being used in like a crunch or a plank. And this connects to the rib cage to the pelvis, and that helps stabilize your spine in the front as well. And then there is the external obliques here. Okay, these are located on the sides, and these help connect the thoracic spine and the pelvis. These produce some flexion and rotation, but also some stabilization, right? And in anti those movements, so from stopping those movements as well. And then your internal obliques. So these are below the external obliques. So these are on the top, and then these are underneath that. And these are part of your abdominal wall. So the very inside structure, right, muscles of your abdomen, they help with pressurization. So that bracing component, right, when you take that breath, brace out. And they help wrap around, right, the body, and they connect to the thoracolumbar fascia, which is in the back, and then the rib cage. Okay, and then around to the front of your abdomen. As you can see here, they connect kind of into the rectus abdominis. And then there is the transverse abdominis. Okay, and that is the sides here. That is what we call your corset muscles. So when you exhale and the rib cage kind of closes in around itself into the front, those are your transverse abdominis wrapping around. And then your multifidus in the back, these connect and stabilize the vertebra back here. And then your pelvic floor is the base of that. Staying on the back, your spinal erectors. So the muscles on the sides of your spine that kind of pop out, those are your erectors. Those help to create extension as well as rotation and stabilization in those anti-movements. And then lastly is the quadratus lumborum, and these connect to your from your lower vertebra, from your lumbar, lower rib, and down into the pelvis. And these help maintain stabilization of the pelvis and lumbar spine. So as you can see, there is so much more involved in your core than just, right, crunches. So when we talk about, right, good posture, what should come to mind is this concept of neutral spine. And that is essentially the natural position of the spine. There is this slight S curve, right? All stacking on top of your midline, which is in your midfoot. Okay, so knee over hip, rib cage here stacked over top of the head. And that is what we're looking for in the position of the plank. So this looks like kind of excessively lordotic, but this position here, this neutral spine position, is the most stable position for your spine to be in based on the shape of the vertebra in it. So those curves are designed, right, or your vertebra are designed with those curves in mind, and they have longer or shorter bony prominences on the spine of the vertebra, depending on where they are at in those curvatures. And those are, again, going to be the most structural, the strongest, most stable position for those structures to be in. That being said, also, that is the most optimal position for your diaphragm to be in order to get full breath, pelvic floor, diaphragm over the pelvic floor, right? Thinking about your abdomen or your core as a canister, okay? Breathing down, up and down into that. If you are overextended or overflexed, okay, those structures don't expand and contract simultaneously together, cohesively, I guess, the way that they should. So that is another reason that you think about the rib cage over pelvis positioning, okay, versus an extended or what people would call like an open rib flare, which can be, again, not optimal for that breathing pattern, which is, again, taking away from that stability of the spine. So diaphragmatic breathing, this is the component, and here is a little diagram of, so here is your stomach, basically, right? This is your body, this is your trunk. The top of this is your diaphragm, the bottom of this is the pelvic floor. And when you brace, when you take your breath in, okay, you expand. As you exhale, you create that pressure internally. Okay, that's a whole nother lesson, but that is intra-abdominal pressure. If you have questions on that, let me know and I will send you a video explaining it a little bit further. But that pressure outward helps contract all of those muscles and create that stability in. Okay, so the intra-abdominal pressure that's pressing out while everything else pushes in and creates tension around the core in order to help hold your spine in place and other structures, essentially, right? Your pelvis, your rib cage. That is the goal and primary job of these muscles here. So that just goes over some pelvic floor transverse abdominal activation. And that is part of the connection, again, to the abdominals, creating good stability. If you need some more support in that, let me know. I'm not going to go over that today. So going into anti-exercises. No, this doesn't mean we're anti-exercise, but this is the concept of spinal stabilization. So there are two types of movement, or there's two types of exercises. There are isotonic, okay, which is creating movement, and there are isometric, which is no movement, okay? So anti-exercises are, in part, technically, isometric exercises for the core that are going to help train that component of stability, which is, again, the primary job of the core and something that we want to be very, very strong so that the rest of your lifts can be strong without compromising the spine. Because if you lose the spine, anybody with a back injury knows that having a compromised spine compromises the entire body, and it sucks. So that is why we like to prioritize these anti-exercises and the main function of the core, okay, used to stabilize the spine. So these are what are called anti-movements. So there are four main movement patterns of the spine, and that is flexion, which is bending over. I had a demonstration of that, but I don't here. So oh, this one. So anti-extension and flexion, so that is forward and back movement. Rotation, right? We twist, and then lateral flexion. So we move from side to side. Those are the the 4 main movement patterns of the spine and capacity of the spine. Okay, but we want to master stabilizing them so that they don't rotate, so that we have a super strong base and trunk to move off of the rest of our lifts and in the rest of our life, basically. So it's really, only after mastering the anti-movement exercises do I recommend prioritizing other core exercises that generate movement or those isotonic core exercises. Okay, and even then they should not make up the majority of your programming. So that would be like going into the crunches, the sit-ups, things like that. Russian twists, bicycles, basically anything with movement. Okay, those should be secondary to all of these stabilization exercises and these components. So your body positioning, okay, and your base, essentially, your levels of stability vary, okay, and are based on the number of joints that are required to be stabilized that determine essentially the difficulty of the exercise. Okay, so the amount of joints, the number of joints that require stabilizing within any given movement or perturbation, okay, whether it's outside or just gravity, okay, whether it's a band, a weight, or gravity, the amount of joints that need stabilizing determine the difficulty of the movement, okay? So there is, step number 1 would be seated, right? The only thing that needs stabilizing here is the spine, okay? And then going into, right, the pelvis is set, the knees are set, that's all set. Ankles are set. Nothing else is involved. You could do like a Pallof press. Again, only the trunk would be involved. And then quadruped. So here you would have, right, you have 6 points of contact, feet, knees, hands. Okay, this is still a very stable position, and this is really only requiring the spine to work from an anti-extension component. Okay, you're not allowing gravity to pull you down into extension. However, right, in order to increase the difficulty of this, you could remove a point of contact. Okay, so then like going into a bird dog, so you would lift up an arm, and the goal would be to maintain your trunk position or maintain your spinal position, okay, without that point of contact, which would require some anti-rotational muscles to activate and hold you in place. So when you lift an arm or a leg, right, those transverse abdominis, your extend or your spinal erectors, as well as your rectus abdominis, all of those are coming into play to keep you still. Okay, and then prone. So face down, again, this would be another very stable position, but this could be used for some anti-flexion exercises like Superman's, okay, holding in those positions, and then could be turned into an anti-extension exercise with 4 points of contact, the plank, right? So picking yourself up onto your knees. So here are some other ones, just again, moving into and through levels of difficulty. So supine, which is lying face up, tall kneeling, that here you have 4 points of contact moving from the 6, and then side lying, again, working on that anti-lateral extension, half kneeling, going into, again, a right unilateral stability position. And then standing, 2 points of contact, but here you're requiring stability from the ankles, knees, hips, and trunk. And then single leg, again, 1 ankle, 1 knee, 1 hip, right? All requiring that to maintain your level stabilization throughout the entire movement, or again, perturbation. So you would have a band or a carry or something like that. So the plank is one of the best, right, kind of full body incorporating anti exercises that you can do. It is an anti technically in and of itself, it is an anti-extension exercise. However, there are tons of variations, which we're going to get to next week, that you can incorporate to give yourself different stressors, okay, to work those different anti-movements. So you can turn a plank, again, a side plank, you can lift an arm, you can do all these things, okay, which we're going to talk about a little more next week. But I just want to give you some components of a full core training program that you can incorporate. And so here, a level 1 would be like 2 to 3 sets of anti-extension, 2 to 3 sets of anti-rotation. Tuesday, 2 to 3 sets of anti-flexion, 2 to 3 sets of anti-lateral flexion. And then Wednesday, 2 to 3 sets of anti-extension, 2 to 3 sets of anti-rotation. So again, that would vary depending on what your body needs, where your weaknesses are, all of that. Okay, and then these are just some level 2 examples, moving into level 3, which incorporates then more isotonic movements for the various movement patterns. So that is all we're going to dive into today. Like I said, I just wanted to give you kind of an overview of why we chose this plank challenge, why it's important, and kind of some education behind that. So if you are interested in our free core training guide, let me know, comment in the video, and I will send it over to you. And if you have any questions on this specifically, then drop them in the comments and I will answer you. Have a beautiful day, guys.